Wait, hold on. Coffee, the price of coffee? Are the ultra rich hoarding coffee? Of course not. Quite frankly, I get a little bit upset is because that worldview is completely in contradiction to my worldview here at Wealth Potion. Gary, if you're watching this, and to all of his followers that are watching this video, I have one simple question. All right, folks, it is time. I'm stepping back into the lion's den. A few months ago, I posted a video and wrote an article challenging some of Gary Stevenson's ideas on economics. And let's just say his fans did not like it. I literally received hundreds of negative comments on that video. And today, I'm doing it again. Not because I enjoy stirring the pot or creating drama, but it's because I genuinely believe that while some of Gary's ideas are well-intentioned, they are extremely dangerous to young people who are trying to build a better life for themselves and build their wealth, which are the reasons I created Wealth Potion in the first place. And so I feel obligated to call out some of those bad ideas and let you, the viewer, decide based on all of the information available. In this video, we're specifically talking about Gary's take on the housing crisis, and spoiler alert, I'm not the only one that sees problems with it. I'm gonna start by talking about the areas in which I agree with Gary, then we'll move into the areas where I disagree, and last but not least, and most importantly, I'm gonna share with you actionable takeaways that you can use to improve your life. And trust me, these disagreements are not just academic. It makes all the difference if you are trying to build your wealth in today's world. So without further ado, let's dive in. What's up everyone? This is Brandon from Wealth Potion, where we discuss personal finance, macroeconomics, but importantly, we provide you with the tools that you can use to build your wealth. And this is very important because I'm going to come back to this at the end of the video. Today, we're discussing Gary's recent take on the housing crisis. And as mentioned, I'm going to start with tackling the areas where I agree with Gary. Firstly, let me clarify. Wealth inequality is too high. A lot of Gary's followers got very angry in my previous video because I shared the opinion that wealth inequality isn't inherently bad. Let me be very clear here. The amount of wealth inequality matters, and I think many people today would agree that wealth inequality has gotten out of control. And there are plenty of data points you can use to take a look at this, but one of my favorite ways to look at wealth inequality is if we look at productivity versus wages. Of course, any chart, graph, or piece of data is going to be an oversimplification because it's trying to take the economy, something that's incredibly complex, and boil it down to a couple of data points. However, if we look at this chart, I really believe it gets to the heart of the issue that Gary is trying to point at, which is if you look at how productive modern society is, the workers at these companies are not enjoying most of those benefits. Or to put it in a slightly other way that I think Gary would agree with, is that capital or assets have appreciated while wages have fallen behind. Again, this is why I think Gary's message has been so strongly resonating with the people of the UK, but quite frankly, the people all around the world, because they experience this in their day-to-day lives. Their lives are getting more expensive. Inflation is hitting them in their pockets. They can't own their first home. And that takes us to the title of his video, which is about the housing crisis. And so if you are one of Gary's economics supporters, I hope you at least watched to this point in the video, because again, I agree with him that wealth inequality is an issue. Where I disagree are some of these solutions. Before we get into those disagreements, let me share one other thing where I agree with him, which is towards the beginning of his video, he says that this is not just a housing crisis. This is an asset price crisis. And so what does Gary say? I'm going to quote from his video here. House prices have gone up, but so have all other assets. So what's actually happened is an asset price crisis. If you look at any asset prices from gold to stocks to Bitcoin, asset prices are going up across the board. However, it's at this point where I start to disagree with Gary, because Gary makes the bold claim that the reason asset prices are going up are because the ultra rich, billionaires for instance, are hoarding these assets. And because they are buying up all of these assets, it is pricing out everyone else. To be clear, I don't 100% disagree with that statement. There is a grain of truth to it, but I want you to hear what Gary says and how he frames it in this video. Again, this is a quote. "This is a global asset price crisis. It doesn't make any sense. If you walk into the supermarket and the price of everything has tripled, and then you pick up the coffee and you say, why is coffee tripled? Wait, hold on. Coffee, the price of coffee? Are the ultra-rich hoarding coffee? Of course not. The ultra-rich are not hoarding groceries. And this is, I think, a very important distinction here because Gary is conflating investment assets going up in price with all goods and services going up in price. The former is absolutely true, but so is the latter. And that is because the core issue here is inflation. He does mention inflation, I think, once in this video, but important to note, he doesn't mention central banking, money printing, quantitative easing, the Federal Reserve, sound money, fiat money. He mentions none of that in this 28-minute video. And that takes me to the first major disagreement, which I think, quite frankly, is where his entire worldview is based on. And again, I'm going to read some quotes here to make sure that I'm not misrepresenting him. He says, and I quote, "At the beginning of COVID, I realized very quickly that the rich would accumulate a lot of money." And then a little bit later in the video, "When you give rich people money, they buy assets." And finally, one more quote here to really drive this point home. "If we give £1 trillion to the richest people in the country, obviously house prices and stock prices will go up." Gary, if you're watching this, and to all of his followers that are watching this video, I have one simple question. Who gave the rich people this money? I'll give you a moment to think about that. If you have an answer, you can feel free to leave that in the comment. As mentioned, I got hundreds of negative comments on my previous video, but I still responded to each and every single one of them. So if you have a different view here, or if you have an answer to that question, I would love to hear from you, genuinely. Please change my view. Post it in the comments and let me know what you think. If you make a bold claim, like if we give £1 trillion to the richest people in society, I think it's important for you to identify who the we is here. But now I will tell you what I think and why I think Gary does not answer that question. Because the people that gave the rich people that money is the government. When Gary references the trillions of pounds that were given to the rich people after COVID, what he's referring to is the fiscal stimulus. The economy was tanking. Countries around the world were going under lockdown. There was a global pandemic, whether you believe in it or not, and the stock market was tanking. So what did governments all around the world do? Starting with the US, they printed money. Now, to be clear, we've done videos on this if you want to check it out. It's not literally printing paper pieces of money, but what they do is they lower interest rates, they do quantitative easing, they lower restrictions for banks to lend to each other, and what this does is it effectively creates money and puts it into the economy. But it doesn't put the money into the economy equally. Of course, yes, some of you may have received a stimulus check for $1,000 or $2,000 from the government, but the trillions of dollars that the government used to stimulate the economy, first and foremost, went to large institutions and banks. In other words, the ultra-rich. This is referred to as the Cantillon effect, that the closer you are to the money faucet, the more you benefit from the money faucet. And so again, why do I think that this is such an important detail that Gary misses? Well, because what is Gary's platform? It's tax wealth, not work. And while that's a very elegant and attractive saying, because who likes taxes on their work when there's all these billionaires? Let's tax them instead. The problem is that these taxes go to the government. So if Gary were to answer that question and he were to say in his videos, hey, actually, those trillions of dollars that the ultra-rich were using to hoard assets, that actually came from the government, it would completely break down his entire argument for higher taxes. And if you're curious about my take on the wealth tax, you can watch my previous video. A lot of people criticized my view. That's not the point of this video. I'm not even gonna talk about a wealth tax specifically because there's so much to cover within a wealth tax and there's a lot of problems that I see with it. Some of you disagree, and that's totally fine. But what's important, and the message I'm trying to get across in this video, is that I find it very interesting that Gary has such a great view of the problem at hand, but he refuses to acknowledge the government's role in creating this problem. To Gary and his followers, it's all about the ultra-rich, and specifically, it's the ultra-rich that work at corporations, not the ultra-rich that work in the government. And so you can tell I'm very passionate about this topic. You might still be wondering though, like, why does Brandon think that this is dangerous? Like, okay, it's a difference in viewpoint. You know, he thinks taxes should be higher. I don't, blah, blah, blah. And that takes me to my last and most important point, because I want to speak directly to you as the viewer, that you, regardless regardless of what financial situation you are in, you can change your financial situation. You have that power. That is the reason I created Wealth Potion. It is to educate people about personal finance, about how stocks work, about how to invest, and how to buy assets. And I find it very interesting that Gary does not talk about these things. Earlier, we already covered how Gary talks about the ultra-rich buy assets. That's what they do. And I agree with him there. That is absolutely what they do. And Gary himself admits that that's also what he does. I'm going to read from the script of his video. I suppose you could say I'm a moderately rich person. If you were to give me 100 grand, I would go that day and buy 100 grand of assets. So why is it that Gary never teaches his audience how to buy assets? Instead, he frames it as a competition, that the ultra rich are buying up assets and there's really nothing you can do about it, aside from campaign your government to increase taxes so that they'll take more of the wealth from the rich and give it back to you. Again, let me be very clear here because I can already hear the keyboards typing away. I am all in support your right to exercise your political power. Vote, call your congressman or congresswoman, protest non-violently, campaign, donate your time and your money to these political campaigns to get the outcomes you want from your governments. But that is not the only thing you can do. You can buy assets. You can invest in the stock market. Yes, it is hard to buy a house, but you can invest in REITs. You can invest in ETFs. You can invest in Bitcoin. You can do what the ultra rich are doing to build their wealth. If I'm wrong, if Gary does have videos where he talks about how to invest in the S&P 500, how to buy stocks, how to build your wealth, please send them to me. I would be happy to be wrong here, and I will fully fall on that sword and say that I completely misjudged Gary. But out of all the videos that I've watched of his, and I've watched quite a few, he never talks about that. And in fact, in many videos, he says that the only way that we can win as the oppressed class is to tax wealth, not work. So now I hope you understand why I'm so passionate about this topic and why, quite frankly, I get a little bit upset, is because that worldview is completely in contradiction to my worldview here at Wealth Potion. I created this YouTube channel and my weekly newsletter to teach people how they can grow their wealth. I started my career with nothing. I inherited nothing. I actually started with negative $50,000 of debt. And I was able to grow my wealth, not through some extreme means, not through buying a house, not through gambling on crypto. I grew my wealth to multiple six figures by using just basic personal finance and investing techniques. And I teach them to you on this channel. And so I do think it is dangerous to teach young people today that there is nothing they can do about their financial situation. Is our fiat financial system unfair? Yes, it is. Are the ultra rich a little bit too rich and they could probably do more for society? Absolutely. Is the government innocent? Absolutely not. And are we helpless and the only thing that we can do is go beg the government to increase taxes and give us more free things? Absolutely not. All right, I'm getting too fired up for this video. As mentioned, if you disagree, please, please, please continue to post in the comments. If you have to dislike the video because that will make you feel better, I'm okay with that. Look, I can take it. I've got thick skin. But my goal here is even if you believe in Gary's worldview, even if you continue to support him and you want to campaign for tax wealth, not work, all the power to you. But I hope you leave this video understanding that you can change your financial future. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And if you'd like to get a bit of a taste of some of the things that I share on how to change your financial future, you can check out the first video in this series where I talk about the levels of wealth, where I literally start at the basic levels of getting out of debt, saving cash, why you should avoid financial advisors, and then eventually how to invest in assets, the thing that Gary says that the ultra rich are doing and we cannot. So anyways, that's it for today. If you like this video, would greatly appreciate you subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.